Welcome back once again. How time flies. This is our last basic training class. I hope you're really feeling empowered with the knowledge you've gained. Now that you know what we're up against with processed food, I'm going to finish up here with 4 simple rules of thumb to follow that will simultaneously maximize your nutritional value and minimize your toxic load. So, first rule of thumb, organic everything, or at least as much as you can get. When you eat organic foods, you eat clean foods with no toxic chemical pesticides or fertilizers or GMO foods. That's right, as I mentioned when we were talking about GMO foods, the organic standard precludes the use of GMO foods. So let me take a few moments to clear up some common points of confusion. Setting aside the cleanness factor, let's examine the issue of whether organic foods are indeed better than their conventionally grown counterparts. Whether organic foods are nutritionally superior to their conventionally grown counterparts has been very controversial and hard to pin down in studies. You may have heard, yes they are, no they aren't, yes they are, no they aren't. So what the heck is going on? There have been a lot of conflicting findings. Dr. Aaron Prosser, a nutritional neuroscientist, sums the problem up this way, quote, "Probably the most consistently reported beneficial findings are those suggesting decreased nitrate content, parentheses, makes sense due to the lack of nitrogen-based fertilizers, end parentheses, increased vitamin C, and increased mineral content, parentheses, including calcium, magnesium, iron, phosphorus, and sodium, end parentheses, in organically produced foods." These findings have been reported for strawberries, peaches, pears, apples, green leafy vegetables, potatoes, wheat, and the list goes on and on. But for all these positive findings, there are just as many that report no difference between organic and conventionally grown produce, end quote. The reason Dr. Prosser cites for all of these conflicting findings is in part the sheer amount of variability in the way these studies are designed and carried out. There is so much variability that it's virtually impossible to compare findings. So what kind of variability are we talking about? Some examples include variability in growing conditions, harvest maturity, freshness, soil types, climates, times of harvesting, and shipping and storing methods used. For example, say I do a study comparing the nutritional content of organic and conventionally grown apples. The conventionally grown apples may be freshly picked, while the organic apples are a week old, or vice versa. This would render them not comparable. Similarly, what if I compare organic and conventionally grown avocados, and the organic are perfectly ripe, while the conventionally grown are extremely unripe, or vice versa? That is, their harvest maturity doesn't align. This would render them not comparable. And what if I compare conventionally grown grapes from California to organic grapes grown in Maine, or vice versa? The different climates would render them not comparable. So these are just a few examples of variability in comparing organic and conventionally grown foods. No wonder there's confusion. One thing we do know, however, is that fruits and vegetables grown 60 years ago were more nutritious than their counterparts grown today. One reason for this is the very modern problem of soil depletion resulting from conventional farming practices, which occurs when agricultural methods strip increasing amounts of nutrients from the soil. A landmark 2004 study by researchers at the University of Texas at Austin studied U.S. Department of Agriculture nutritional data from both 1950 and 1999 for 43 different fruits and vegetables. What they found were, quote-unquote, reliable declines in the amount of protein, calcium, phosphorus, iron, riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, and vitamin C over that 50-year period. The researchers attributed this decline in nutritional content to the use of agricultural practices designed to improve traits, size, growth rate, and pest resistance. If organic foods are grown using farming practices that maintain the integrity of the soil, and in so doing maintain the integrity of the nutrient content, it makes complete sense to me that organic foods are superior, not just in terms of cleanliness, but in terms of nutritional content. I do realize that organic food may be hard to get where you live. So I'm going to take a moment to hedge on the organic everything standard in certain cases, even though this is still the standard to shoot for. If organic isn't available, you need to have some way of knowing what conventionally grown foods are relatively low in toxins. In terms of chemical pesticides, some types of produce are sprayed to a much greater degree than other types. So if your organic options are limited, you can feel pretty safe in getting certain conventionally grown produce. Here I've included a list compiled by the Environmental Working Group, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, public interest organization, of pesticide rankings for fruits and vegetables. The produce is sorted from highest pesticide load to lowest, and it provides a score based on a variety of criteria. The lower the score, the cleaner the food. You can determine a cutoff point at which you're comfortable getting certain conventionally grown foods based on this list. I'm very fastidious about keeping to the organic standard, but I also keep in mind, based on what's available, which conventionally grown foods I feel are safe based on their score. My own cutoff point is a pesticide load below 10. That is, I would not buy any conventionally grown produce with a pesticide load higher than 10, and even then, I would have to want it pretty badly. But keep in mind what we just talked about. Even if a conventionally grown food has low pesticide residue, that doesn't mean it's equivalent in quality to its organic counterpart. It's still grown with chemical fertilizers that can deplete the soil of mineral content and affect the nutritional quality of the food. But you can only make the best choices based on what's available to you. Second rule of thumb, naturally raised animal products, also known as grass-fed or pastured. Naturally raised animals spend their entire lives in a pasture setting. They've been given no antibiotics or added hormones, and they have been fed a diet that is natural to them and free of conventionally grown or GMO foods or animal byproducts. We want our food animals to be raised on a diet that's natural to them. What happens when we eat foods that are unnatural to us? That is, highly processed foods. We get fat and sick, right? Well, the same goes for animals. Farmers have known for thousands of years that limiting an animal's physical activity and feeding it a primarily grain diet will fatten it up quickly. Cows and all hooved animals eat grass, not grain, or GMO corn, or antibiotics, or hormones, or the byproducts of other animals, which they certainly are fed in conventional feedlots. In fact, according to Eric Schlosser in Fast Food Nation, his shocking expose of the fast food industry, quote, "Current FDA regulations allow dead pigs and dead horses to be rendered into cattle feed, along with dead poultry." Before World War II, all American beef was called grass-finished, meaning cattle ate pasture grass their entire lives. Today, while most cows start out on pastures, the vast majority are shipped to feedlots 2 to 4 months prior to slaughter to be fattened up with grain. That's plenty of time for the quality of their meat to degrade from cramped, inhumane conditions, stress, disease, antibiotics, and added hormones, and poor quality food. Unless you intentionally choose grass-fed or pastured meat, the beef you buy at the store will be corn-fed from a feedlot, and there's a very good chance that corn will be GMO corn. I'll add one more thing. Some stores use the term grass-fed even though the meat is from a cow that ended up on a feedlot. So make sure you ask at the meat counter whether the so-called grass-fed beef they're selling is from cows that spent their entire lives on the pasture. In my experience, farmers markets are the best places to get truly pastured meats and other animal products, including milk, yogurt, cream, butter, cheese, and eggs. Pigs are omnivores just like us, and like a human, they'll eat almost anything. But what are not parts of their natural diet are antibiotics and hormones. So again, look for naturally raised pork from small family farms that are able to control quality while providing a healthy, humane, natural environment for their pigs. Nyman Ranch is a great example of a company dedicated to maintaining these standards. It's structured as a network of more than 500 small farms that produce naturally raised pigs as well as cows and lambs, and this enables them to maintain naturally raised standards while at the same time benefiting from the size of the collective farms, which it needs to compete against the huge factory farms. Chickens are also omnivores. They eat not only grass but bugs. Factory farm chickens are raised on grain, the byproducts of other chickens, and antibiotics. So look for pastured chicken and eggs. I've found that it's not easy finding truly pastured chicken in stores. I get truly pastured chicken from my farmer's market every week. Then I know it's not only clean but humanely raised, and that's very important to me too. There are, however, some good pastured eggs at my local Whole Foods market. I like Vital Farms and Alexandre's. A lot of so-called free-range eggs come from chickens that are given access to the outside, but that doesn't mean they go outside. And they're often fed grain or soy. If you look inside the egg carton, many companies have little stories about how their chickens are fed. They'll often say, fed a pure vegetarian diet. This means they're fed grain or soy. Well, even if it's organic grain or soy, chickens eat grass and bugs. Grain is not a natural food for them. But again, I realize you can only buy the best of what's available to you. And so again I say, farmer's market. Naturally raised animal products are not only cleaner, they're more nutritious than their conventionally raised counterparts. Let's take beef as an example. As you'll learn when we talk about fats in a few classes, omega-3 fat is extremely heart healthy and has anti-inflammatory effects. And you get twice as much of it in grass-fed beef than you do in feedlot beef. You also get 2 to 3 times as much conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, which is a special fatty acid found only in animals that's been shown in studies to reduce cancer risk in humans. You also get 3 times more vitamin E and 7 times more beta-carotene. Not too shabby. Here's one of those egg carton inserts I was talking about. This is from Vital Farms, and it tells the story of its chickens. I love things like this. As I've already mentioned, I think companies owe it to us, their customers, to be transparent about the foods they sell us. What do they have to hide? If you're a company like Vital Farms, nothing. They have a quality product and they want everyone to know it. Now let's talk about buying fresh foods from local sources. Locally sourced foods are fresher, and I don't have to tell you that the fresher the food, the higher the nutrient content. So-called fresh foods can actually be quite old. Transport time from the farm to the distribution center can be up to 5 days. Then it has to get to the store, and that can take from days to weeks. Then it has to be unpacked and put out. It can take several days before it's purchased. Then it has to be eaten, and people can keep fruits and vegetables for up to a week before eating them. The cumulative time from farm to consumption can add up to weeks and even months for some foods. Most fruits and vegetables are composed of 70 to 90% water, and once they're separated from their source of nutrients, that is, the tree, the plant, or the vine, they start losing moisture and nutrient content. So the fresher the food, the more nutritious the food. To streamline the time from farm to your home, look for the locally grown tag on fresh foods. And one more time, let me put in a plug for farmers markets. Unless you have your own organic garden, they're the best way to get very fresh local foods. I love my farmers market. I'm lucky that I have a year-round farmers market a mile from my home, and I go every Sunday morning, rain or shine. Now let's talk about our last rule of thumb, whole and minimally processed foods. Think of a spectrum of wholeness, with whole foods such as an apple on one end and highly processed foods such as an apple cinnamon Nutri-Grain bar on the other end, which is loaded with additives and unhealthy ingredients. In between, but very close to the whole foods end, you might find organic unsweetened applesauce. We want to stay as close to whole on this spectrum as possible because whole and minimally processed foods, especially if they're organic, will be very clean, nutritious foods. Conversely, the farther up the spectrum you go, the more refined and the more additives and poor quality ingredients you're going to get. Now, what about apple jam? This jam has a nice gourmet look to it, doesn't it? And it was probably handmade in someone's kitchen. But unless a fruit spread is 100% pureed fruit, it's typically loaded with sugar. And what's sugar? In addition to being a sweetener, it's also a highly refined preservative. And as we'll learn, we want to minimize the added sugar in our food. Fruits in particular are already high in sugar, so they don't need added sweeteners. Even if this apple jam is organic, I would still put it higher on the spectrum because of its sugar content. In contrast, the applesauce is not only organic, it's unsweetened. Well, that's our last rule of thumb, but let me throw in a little bonus here. What about seafood? From my experience, there are two common misconceptions about seafood. First, that fish is the only farmed seafood, and second, that all farmed fish is lower in quality than its wild counterparts. I know I used to think this, but the truth is it's not that simple. First, farm-raised seafood includes a broad variety of fish, as well as lobster, shrimp, scallops, mussels, oysters, clams, and abalone. And while farming practices have been known to have negative environmental effects, as well as foster disease in fish, it would be unfair and inaccurate to lump all farms into this category. Also, countries have different regulatory standards for seafood, as well as for how seafood is caught and what seafood can be caught. On the other side, even if a fish is wild, it could be endangered or caught using practices that harm the environment or other marine life, or it could be contaminated with mercury or some other toxin. The Environmental Defense Fund, another nonpartisan, nonprofit consumer group, has done a lot of the legwork that we can benefit from by creating a list of seafood choices based on all the criteria listed on the preceding slide. Take this to the store with you and you'll be able to select the best quality seafood, whether farmed or wild, as well as the seafood harvested in the most environmentally friendly ways. Well, we've made it to the end of Basic Training Module 1. Congratulations! I sure have enjoyed being your basic training drill instructor. I hope I haven't been too hard on you. Now, when we start Module 2, Drill Down to Ramp Up, we do just that. We start drilling down on our macronutrients. Remember, I told you we were coming back to that. Over the next 3 classes, you are going to learn all about carbs, protein, and fats, and we'll do a lot of food label reading. The 4th class in this module is all about portions and proper balance. Have you ever wondered how much of what you should be eating? This class will give you the answer. Now, I suggest giving yourself a week to absorb all that you've learned before moving on to Module 2. You don't want to go so fast that you get overwhelmed by too much information. For this week, continue with your previous action items and use the food quality principles that you just learned to make quality upgrades to your foods. Next, find a farmer's market in your area and try it out. I think you'll be hooked once you do. To find one, just do a web search for farmers markets in your local area. Finally, if you're working with buddies, meet with them so you can continue supporting each other through this process. So, congratulations once again for doing a stellar job in basic training. I'm really proud of you for sticking it out. I'll see you soon for Module 2. Cheers!